Hello and welcome back to the show. And in today's latest episode, we have a guest that I'm familiar with that commentates on iRacing. You might recognise him in there, or you might even recognise him from commentating in real life, starting last season, I think. And it's Paul Walsh. Paul, it's nice to have you on the show, and thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, and perhaps good night, depending on where you're catching this. I hope you're all doing well, and it's great to be here, Ryan. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Been looking forward to having you on, and yeah, talking about loads of things. But first off, looking to your basically your interest in motorsport, it's a question that I ask all the time, and it probably sounds maybe repetitive or just the same usual question. But how did your interest or your passion for motorsport come about? Was it sort of one of those things that was it through family, or was it just sort of just was it something that you discovered yourself?
No, it's a fair question. So for me, motorsport, my interest in it began when I was very young. My dad was a massive fan of motorsport, and so was my mum to perhaps a lesser degree. This was in the year, of course, so for anyone who's curious, I was born in 1993. So what I remember is at what would have been 3 years old, being sat on my dad's lap when Damon Hill became the 1996 Formula One world champion at Suzuka, with the infamous tyre coming flying off of Jack Villeneuve's car, and meanwhile Damon Hill bringing it on home, and the infamous frog in my throat quote from Murray Walker, may he rest in peace. That's where it all started. Although I remember as I was growing up, 'cause I don't have too much memory of my childhood, not because it was traumatic or anything like that, well, at least not that I remember. But I do remember really growing up and watching what was the Super Touring era of the British Touring Car Championship, which I absolutely adore. The days of what was Gabriel Tarquini, Jason Plato, Alan Menu, Tim Harvey, and the absolute door banging that happened there. And it really perpetuated. And I used to watch a lot of BTCC, plus also watched a lot of Formula One. And over time, it has just continued that enthusiasm. And then I sort of had a bit of a quiet period as I went through the latter half of my education at secondary school and then subsequently university, where I didn't keep in touch with it as much. And then I think reading around the 2016-2017 era, I started to watch more GT3 based racing. So, for example, the Blanc Pond Championship that now has evolved into the SRO GT World Challenge Series, and then the likes of IMSA, etc. So it's always been there. It's just sort of ebbed and flowed. And well, let's not come on to the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix of
Oh yeah.
2021, shall we? Because that was definitely a dark day for my enthusiasm of motorsport. Not because I'm a Hamilton fan, before people think that. I'm a fan of both Verstappen and Hamilton, but that's a story down another path. I think that'll lead us off topic.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, I know that I've mentioned WW 2021 in the past, and yeah, it's opened up a can of worms, caused World War Three, or came close to causing World War Three. But like we say, we'll move on from that. But yeah, you talk about the super touring era from the BTCC or touring car racing in general. I think for me that was one of my favourite periods of touring car racing, just because you had so many manufacturers and the racing throughout the field was so close to, especially in the BTCC or even the STW, which was, if my memory is correct, that was a super touring wagon shafter or something like
Yeah.
that. So, uh, yeah, it's just that's why I got into watching touring car racing. It was just I think that was probably for me the best period of touring car racing then, just because you had I can't remember how many manufacturers, but you had the likes of say like Volvo, BMW, was it Nissan for our
Yeah.
American friends. Who else did we have?
Yeah, Honda.
We had Honda as well, yeah. Did we have? Did I say Ford already? I can't remember.
You haven't said Ford, nor have you said
No,
Audi or Peugeot.
Audi and Peugeot as well. Yeah, I completely forgot about them. And also we had for a short while in the early 90s we had the Mazda, I believe.
Yeah, I think we did have a brief spell with Mazda.
I think that was David Leslie, Matt, was it Matt Neal, and who else? And uh, crikey, this is taking so my age now, going back it. But yeah, my favourite period. And who was your favourite touring car driver from in the BTCC? Not just from the Super Touring era, but just in general.
Oh, there's only one for me. It has to be Dick Dastardly himself, Jason Plato, just because I Obviously, his story is a very interesting one. I mean, there's the whole story about him essentially camping outside the Renault Williams office to make sure he could speak to Frank Williams to get his seat alongside Alan Menu, if I remember my history correctly. But that in itself is a story. The thing I love about Plato, and it's something that, because I used to watch a lot of Fifth Gear with him and Tiff Needell, and also subsequently seen him on the grid all the way through to essentially his final years. And well, he's meant to be coming back later this year for 2026 as a team manager for Plato Racing. It's just the attitude of very serious business in the car, but outside of the car, I mean, I won't use the words that perhaps many would use to describe him, but definitely he's a bit of an animal, but also he can have a laugh. He's a character. He really, I get Plato. That's why he resonates so well with me, is the fact that I get it. We're here to do serious business in the cars, and you know what? It's elbows out. If somebody ends up in the barrier as a result of it, well, so effing be it, he'd probably say. Yeah. And then straight afterwards out the car, it's just sort of, yeah, that's the race done. And on to the next one, right? And also the fact that you can have someone who literally gets in the car and drives so quickly, and then whether he's presenting a show or being interviewed, actually can be very open, very transparent, talking a lot about, say, mental health quite recently. That was one of the big conclusions of the 2025 BTCC program, if you want, ITV, having that big talk about mental health. I just love that part about him. And one other individual, if I did have to name somebody else, who I've had the pleasure of meeting in person, a real genuine guy, everyone's favourite Liverpudlian, of Paul O'Neill. Although I must say the fact that it's just such a very friendly guy, but also crazy to think that he's still racing MX-5s even to today, and also commentating on TCR UK.
Yeah, I was about to say I completely forgot he commentates on TCR UK, and I know, Paul O'Neill is one of those people. I first came across his name in the BTCC in the early 2000s. I think this was going back way, must be around 2001, I think, when he was racing. I can't remember what car it was. It was a Peugeot, but I can't remember it was basically back when the BTCC was running the production car class. I think it was at the time when this is when the super touring era was starting to kind of fade away, just because of so much money was being spent, and that basically it was kind of getting to that point where the BTCC was, I think it was not being cost out of existence, but it was more they were needing to find maybe solutions to kind of like fill the grid, just because there was not that many super tourers left at the time. So this is when they brought in the production car class, and that was when I came across Paul O'Neill, and then basically I kept an eye on him when he got promoted up into the works, the Vauxhall squad, Vauxhall team, at the time. This is going back about probably, when was this? About 2000 was it 2002 or 2003? Again, show my age, so yeah, probably forgetting about it. But yeah, Paul O'Neill's one of those people. He's like you say, he's a bit of a character, and he's one of those people that's always he's always got that kind of like he's got that bit of a Danny Ricciardo thing about him. But he's always smiling, having a laugh all the time, and that's what I love about him, because he's just he comes across as such a down to earth guy. Even I've not spoken to him in person, but on social media when I've interacted with him, like basically he's always came across as a kind of just a funny guy, and just always up for interacting with the fans. And I think that's what one of the things that makes basically Paul O'Neill, for me, one of the greats of not just the touring car racing in general, but just when it comes to fan interaction, he's probably just like one of the best.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I had the pleasure last year of covering for him for a couple of race days on TCR UK, where he was racing in one of the domestic or national series here in the UK in the Mazda MX-5s. And so it was myself alongside Andy McEwan. And we had the running joking in that I was essentially Timu Paul, standing in for Paul O'Neill. But when Paul came along, I mean, the first thing he would say to me when I got to meet him in person, because he'd listened to the broadcast the previous day, he said, "I don't even need to bother turn up. They won't know the difference between me and you. It's just the same Paul, right?" But the fact that he was and this guy who you sort of look at as a celebrity, he can just walk in and just diffuse any tension at all and just make you think, like you say, down to earth. He is just a normal guy like all of us here. And I love that about those individuals. And I suspect going into full circle with Jason Plato, he would be quite similar in the fact you could probably meet up with said individual and go to the pub with them and have a beer. And by the end of it, it's not you and famous person X. It's just the two of you having a drink, having a laugh, slightly tipsy and heading home for the night. That's it. That's what I love about them. That's the characters I really do love in motorsport.
And then moving on, or basically sticking with motorsport, is there any other series that you've watched, or any other series that you're currently watching at the moment?
So I have gradually got more and more engrossed in the World Endurance Championship and really been enjoying that. Plus, also one championship that I did spend a lot of time watching last year, more casually rather than getting too engrossed in it, but I just loved watching it on the sort of sidelines, was the Toyota Gazoo Racing North America GR86 Cup Series in its full title. Just because seeing the Toyota GR86 Cup cars be chucked around circuits it's always great fun. And I think one of the appeals I've definitely had with regards to motorsport has been the slower the car, actually the more, not to be unfair to the likes of GT3 racing, but I think the slower the car, the more exciting the racing can be, because every mile per hour in those cars really takes a huge amount of effort to extract. And that's why I think is one of the biggest things that's perhaps not appreciated in motorsport as perhaps it could is Formula One's great, don't get me wrong. Cars that can do the best part of 120 miles an hour around a corner that the average road car can only do 60 around shows you how far aerodynamics have advanced. But when you see, say, what would be the Mini Cooper Cups racing here in the United Kingdom, the fact that they're going around a corner at 60 miles an hour, they're on the edge of adhesion and they're still battling each other. And these guys are racing in cars which, yeah, they clearly are being pushed to the absolute limit. You just think to yourself, yeah, you don't need a huge amount of speed to be having fun.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love my GT3 racing. I love my basically prototypes, say your GTPs or hypercars or LMP2 cars. I love them, but I find I'm the same with you. I watched basically the whole season of the Toyota GR Cup North America last season, and it was one of those. It's just one of those series that I loved watching it, especially like you say, you don't need loads of downforce or loads of power to have great racing. And I think that series proved that basically all you need to do is basically if you want to go quick on those cars, it appears that you have to basically wring the neck out of it to basically be quick. And that's what I loved about watching that series, because all the drivers are pretty much on the limit every lap, and the race was just absolutely fantastic. And if anyone's looking for a series to watch, I would definitely recommend watching it, because it's just, the times I watched it last season, I was just like gobsmacked, because everyone was banging doors and not pushing each other off, but it was just basically kind of like door rubbing all the time, and it was just fantastic to watch. And the series I like to watch as well, and as part of the IMSA package, is the, I don't know if you watch it, but the Mazda MX-5 Cup.
Oh yeah, the Mazdas.
The slipstream battles in that series is just unreal. Especially, again, if you've not watched the races from Daytona, I would recommend going on either the Mazda MX-5 Cup YouTube channel, or type up or look up on the IMSA channel as well, and you'll find it, because I was watching. I can't remember if it was last season or the season before, where I think it was the last lap, everyone was heading up to the finish line and everyone was going about 4 or 5 wide up to the start-finish line. I was like, wow. And it's something I'm looking forward to watching next year when I head over to Daytona for the 24, because it's definitely became one of my favourite series.
Oh, fantastic. The fact that you'll be able to witness it in person next year will make it even more sweeter.
Yeah. And then with the motorsport as well, I think, is there anything else that you're watching? Obviously, you mentioned that you've started watching the World Endurance Championship, but do you watch anything else, from say like America, or say like IMSA, for example?
Oh, I do catch IMSA where I can, to be honest. I mean, I've always been curious. Whenever there is one of the old Lexus RCF GT3s on the grid anywhere, I always tune into that immediately as a big Lexus fanboy. And seeing the old lady of the GT3 class, if you will, one of the oldest, dated all the way back to 2016, essentially still racing out there. Knowing it will be replaced soon by the Toyota GT3 concept or whatever they're going to give it in terms of its name. But that's definitely kept me watching there, and seeing Jack Horsworth in particular really put together some incredible results in a car that many would say, why is it even still on the grid, let alone trying to win races? So I've been watching that. Otherwise, obviously, BTCC, I've been keeping an eager eye and absolutely love it to bits. And I think one of the series that I do want to get more involved in, and this was actually something suggested to me by a competitor in the sim racing series I've been covering recently, is checking out the Hyundai Excel Cup in Australia, because supposedly it's one of the feeder series of V8 supercars. Now, I'd never heard of it, but I checked it out the other day, just some brief clips, and tiny little Hyundai Accents, as they're known in the UK. I think they're the third generation of them, and running only around with about 100 to 120 horsepower engines, and they are door banging so much you'd think they were in V8s until you realise, no, it's a tiny little car.
Yeah, I mean, I used to watch. Oh, this is going back probably a few years ago. I used to watch like V8 supercars a lot of like big time. When Craig Lowndes was racing full time, and then basically once he retired from the series, and basically they started changing and bringing in the new cars, it kind of just my interest faded a little bit, just because I mean I've got nothing against the new cars, but it's just not my thing. I just think the cars are too aerodynamically like reliant now, just too much downforce, like splitters and wings, and it's just for me it's just not racing. I maybe maybe I'm old school, but I prefer like cars that are maybe I've still got some downforce, but they're not say like that. Yeah, it's more down to the driver, if you like, to wring the neck out of it and be quick all the time. But yeah, that's just my view.
I get where you're coming from. I mean, I must admit, I always think that simplicity is best. As soon as you start adding complexity, I mean, we could talk for days, I think, about the latest regulations in Formula One and the fact that it took the best part of half an hour to an hour for the presenters to explain what's all changed and everything. I believe in one of the test sessions, because I haven't caught up with that yet. I do need to. But I do think there is an appreciation that is being missed in a way, in the fact if you keep the rules and regulations simple and actually you keep the cars simple and just focus on the core racing, it's always going to lead to an absolutely brilliant recipe. Once you start add more complexity, or you start adding a huge number of aerodynamic refinements, you start to naturally, you cause a risk of losing interest from people, but also on top of that as well, you actually start to potentially narrow down the pool of people who can compete, not just in terms of driver ability, but also the number of teams that everyone can probably afford the car to get it on the grid, yes, but can they afford all the refinements they need to now make to the car in order to make it compatible when you start changing other items of the car that weren't changed 10 years ago, for example, etc.? Because money, as always, is one of the big deciding factors if you can be on the grid or not, beyond have you got the talent to be there.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's one of those things as well that like, it's just I think this has always been part of motorsport. Like basically, if you want to try and progress through the career ladders, say for example, for Formula One, you've got your feeder series like I can't remember what they call them now. I think it's a GP3. No, not GP3. It's is it F3, F2, or something like that. So basically, if you want to progress through the career ladders of the feeder series before Formula One, you've got to have like big money behind you, and it's always something that I found. I know people are going to say, "Oh, but you always need money to progress," but it's one of those things. I prefer to see drivers get opportunities through hard graft and just basically kind of like showing their talent and showing how quick they can be and getting results. And I think with the career ladders to Formula One, it's more down to money than anything. But if it comes to like touring car racing or say like GT racing, there's been drivers that have came through like the support series or the support series ladder, or even through something like the Porsche Motorsport the junior, yeah, Porsche Motorsport junior, junior rank. Sorry, if they've not got money behind them, they're still being given opportunities by say like Porsche, because Porsche's giving them the opportunity by like kind of like funding them, if you like,
Yeah,
basically helping them to get drives and kind of like help them develop. And I think that's a good thing. Basically, it shows that even if you've not got the money behind you, you've always got big manufacturers that are willing to put their neck on the line, if you like, to support drivers. And I think that, for example, when you look at Porsche and GT racing or sports car racing in general, they've had some amazing drivers come through the junior ladder. I mean, one driver that I've been impressed by quite a lot. Is I don't know if you've heard of him. Is Lauren Heinrich?
No, I haven't heard of him yet.
Yeah, I would definitely I would definitely recommend checking him out because he's a quick driver. He's always someone that I've watched since he raced in was it Porsche Carrera Cup Deutschland or Porsche Carrera Cup Germany. So, and then basically just kind of watching him come through the Porsche ranks, and he basically became a Porsche factory driver. I think last season, I think, or towards the end of last season, I think, and yeah, recently won was it the Daytona 24 with who was his co-drivers? Let me check. Julian Anlauer and Felipe Nasr. So,
oh yes.
So yeah, I was happy to see him get a big win, a big win in a 24-hour race, and considering it was his first race, like proper racing, was it in a GTP car or basically GTP or hypercar, but because they're basically the same thing anyway. So, but yeah, happy to see him, and he's also someone that's came up through iRacing as well. So yeah, that's why I was happy to see him win, just because he kind of showed that if you're on iRacing and you put your mind to it, you can come up through iRacing and basically come up through racing in real life, and if you stick with it, you can get the opportunities. And he showed that.
Oh, 100%. And I think that's a really nice segue in a way to the whole world of sim racing and how important it is nowadays, in that in the past, obviously, you didn't really have the simulator as such, or you had the simulators, but you had to have a lot of money and a whole huge amount of space behind you to be able to do it. Whereas now, I mean, for the best part of, let's say, hypothetically, yes, it's a lot to some, but not even spending £1,000 now in the United Kingdom, at least, you can buy all the gear at an entry level, plus also pay for your subscriptions you need to go on, say, iRacing or another service, and you can be doing the racing within your own home, and you never know what it's going to lead you to. And so many individuals I've spoken to at grassroots in the United Kingdom, youngsters all the way through to adults well older than I am, have all said the same thing, which is they're learning the circuit on the simulator, and then they go to a track day and they find it's about 50 to 70% of the way there. They've just got to get used to the G-forces, plus also the fact that perhaps that curb at turn number one actually is a little bit longer than the simulator, or it's changed surface. But other than that, they're learning.
Yeah, and yeah, like you say, as we move on to sim racing now, like you say, you don't. Everyone in sim racing, like, basically, they're think nowadays. I've heard loads of people say about they want to get into iRacing or sim racing in general. They're saying, "Oh, I've got to spend this amount of money to buy a rig and they basically like a wheel and pedal set." And I'm thinking I always say to them, it's like you don't have to spend anything like that. You can. I mean, at the moment, I run basically a next level racing wheel stand and a Moza racing wheel, and I run, let me check, a Thrustmaster load cell, not Thrustmaster, sorry, I've just replaced them, a Fanatec load cell pedal. So, and that I didn't have to spend any sort of stupid money to like basically get them. It's basically my best advice is basically don't try and buy everything at once. Kind of just buy one bit at a time, because if basically that's what I've done anyway. I mean, I done that with when I bought my new PC, but that I'm using at the moment. I saved up and then bought that, and then basically my Fanatec pedals, I bought them when I could afford them, or basically had enough money saved up, and then my Moza Moza R5 wheel that I bought in the middle of last year, that basically it didn't cost as much as I thought it would. So basically, my best advice is buy one bit at a time when money allows, when finances allow, and basically you'll be fine. And then I think it's the same with iRacing. The amount of people I've heard complain about iRacing saying, "Oh, it's too expensive," but it's like I always say it. I don't know if it sounds silly or not, but I always say iRacing's only expensive if you make it expensive.
Yeah,
so basically, just buy your content when you need it. So, say for example, if I was like last night, racing at Le Mans, I didn't have to buy that track because I've had that track since it was released back in, when was it released? 2008? Was it 2018 or 19? Something like that. Anyway, so
sounds like it.
I think it was 2018. I think it was. I believe so. Yeah. Basically, most of the tracks I have now, so I don't have to worry about anything like that. But again, it's just basically just buy content when you have to.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that's with any of those. I mean, it's with any hobby. It doesn't have to be sim racing. You could be collecting miniatures, or alternatively, you could be collecting expensive guitars. Any hobby that you have, if you love it, you'll know shortly because you won't mind the idea of spending the money on it in order to further your hobby. It's like if you've got your favorite car that you've had for years. A lot of people who perhaps aren't interested in cars will go, why don't you just sell it on? It's a heap of junk if you've got a car from over 20 years ago and the rust is coming through, etc. But you'll spend the money on it because you love it and you want to keep it there. And it's because it makes you happy. And that's the same with sim racing. If it does make you happy, then you'll spend the money eventually on it, even if finances don't allow it right here and now. And on the equipment side, I think there's something that's very true to the whole saying, and I think we've all heard it, which is all the gear and no idea, which is actually if you do go in at the entry level, invest initially on some decent gear, but nothing too expensive. And then you'll have the idea of whether you're enjoying it and whether you think you can find the time and not get frustrated when somebody's half a second quicker than you. We've all been there. There's always a faster driver. And then you might want to invest in that equipment once you really feel as actually, you know what, I love this. I'm ready to get into the competitive world. And also, I'm not going to lose my mind if I get beaten to the finish line.
Yeah, I'm the same. I mean, I used to be like that ages ago when people would go quicker than me, and I would be thinking to myself, how do I do that, or where do I find the time to go quicker? But nowadays, I sort of just say to myself, I just treat it as fun now because I know I'll never be as quick as say. For example, say take for example the SRI GTE series that I race and that you commentate on yourself. It's basically you've got drivers like the real life Lamborghini factory driver Mirko Bortolotti, who's absolutely rapid on. I've watched him loads of times in iRacing, and he's just he's so damn quick. It's unbelievable. But I just say to myself, don't worry about drivers like that. Just kind of just focus on drivers that are racing in say the same class as me, because if you're looking at other drivers that are in a different class and they are so much quicker, maybe say like half a second to 2 seconds quicker, if you start looking at them too much, from my experience, I find you just start kind of over driving, stressing too much and worrying too much instead of just focusing on having fun. And I found since I've kind of just focused on myself and just doing my own thing, it's become a lot more enjoyable. I mean, yeah, you might have the odd bad race where results don't go your way, but it's one of those things that I just go on with the attitude of it's like, if I have a bad race, I have a bad race. There's always another day and another race to focus on.
Oh, 100%. That's the thing. You can only do what's within your control. What your rivals are able to do on the race day, that's entirely up to them. But the pace you bring to the table, the consistency, any errors you make, that's the thing you can control up to a point. And I agree with you there. That's the thing that I focus on when I used to do sim racing, which I have not touched the sim racing wheel now in over a year. I desperately need to at some point find some time to do so because it's just gathering dust left of me. But and that's what I found when I did compete in, for example, UK Sim Racing's GT3 Championship a few seasons ago, was that so long as I feel happy with the fact I can spend 60 minutes of racing and not crash the car of my own volition or have a very low chance of doing so, and I can get to the finish line, that's a big tick in the box for me. If we can find some extra pace in the days in the build-up to a race, great. Otherwise, we're going to lock that in. We'll go with the setup we got and just do what I can do best, because I can always go faster next time. I can always find another 10th. It's not as though it's do or die.
Absolutely. And then looking at your career in sim racing commentating as well, how did your involvement with that come about? Was it sort of something that you were looking at, or something that you wanted to do, or is it something that basically you kind of did your passion for that come about by watching broadcasts and listening to other people commentate, or is it just something you kind of just said to yourself, I fancy giving this a go. Let's give it a go and see where it ends up.
Oh, so this is a fun story. It's a mixture of all of the above, actually. So if I wind things back, pre-COVID, so this would have been in, I want to say, towards the end of 2018, early 2019, is when I first touched a sim racing platform. I bought myself a PlayStation 4 after watching a few content creators showing content of the manufacturer series for Gran Turismo Sport at the time, the FIA sponsored series. And I thought, you know what, that looks really cool. I used to play Gran Turismo on the PS1 and the PS2. So therefore I thought, let's give this a go. I did it on controller at the time, and that's where I got into sim racing, albeit a few years later than perhaps I should have, but I got into it then. But what really then kicked the ball rolling was during the COVID era, at least in the United Kingdom. So we're looking more towards, I want to say 2021 now. It's been so long. So a few friends and I one evening were watching another friend of ours compete in a little series being hosted by a community. It wasn't anything serious. There's no monetary prizes on the line or anything. But they put on a broadcast. They had one member of the staff team at that community provide a broadcast purely off their own back, just for a bit of a laugh. And we were watching the broadcast, and we all agreed that the commentator, not being unfair to them, was very dry. There was no excitement. And when big events were happening in the race, it wasn't sold to us as exciting. So I jokingly said to my friends at the time, this was in a Discord call or a voice over the internet protocol chat, I can probably do better. So one of them picked up on me saying it and said, we'll tell you what, next time we watch the broadcast, how about we all watch it as we have been, but we'll mute the stream and they'll just have me commentate over it. Now, keep in mind, I have never commentated over a race event, real or simulated at any point. And so I did it the next week, and I absolutely loved doing it. My friends said to me, well, you did a good job. Do you want to do it again? So I did it for the rest of the season, which was just another 2 rounds. And they said, you're really good at this. Why don't you volunteer to do it for some communities and just see what happens? So that's what I did. So I went from essentially doing it amongst friends. I volunteered to do it for, I think it was none other than the Drivers Room community on Gran Turismo Sport. And then naturally I got picked up by other communities. And then there was a Club 100 simulated event on Gran Turismo Sport, at which point that was several other sim racing communities who all were participating. It was essentially in a way, a team versus team tournament, but it was a drivers' championship. You had, I think, 4 representatives from about 30 different communities, and they narrowed it down round by round to just a final grid of 12 drivers. At which point, I then had Mark Sykes from Next Gen Racing, and I owe a lot to Next Gen Racing, to be fair. If it were not for them, I don't think this would have domino affected as it has now. But Mark essentially got in touch, and he said that I was doing a great job, and would I be interested in providing coverage for their Gran Turismo Sport BMW M4 series, or their Group 4 series. I think it was just BMWs, actually. So I said, yes, you know what, let's give it a go. And they offered to pay me. And my first payment, it wasn't in money. I still have it upstairs. My first payment was with an official Next Gen Racing hoodie, which I absolutely cherish it to this day. So that got me involved there. And then they enjoyed that so much, they said, well, we're trying to expand our operations on PC. So, because they had done during the COVID lockdown in, I think it was 2020, they had done the PMR-E series in collaboration with PowerMax Racing, and they'd also got involvement from some BTCC stars, if I remember correctly. They said to me, look, we want someone on PC. If you've got a PC that can handle Assetto Corsa Competizione, then we will essentially set up a series, we'll do a test event to see whether it all works out okay, and then if that works out, we'll have you cover our series. So that all went well. They hosted a one-off event, and then subsequently through Mark Sykes and also at the time Kevin Smith, when he was working with Next Gen Racing, they set up an official GT3 championship on ACC, and I did work there, and they started to pay me for these events. So that was my first professional gig, if you define professional as being paid to deliver a service, which is the way I define professional. So with that, then it really expanded from there. So I covered their first GT3 championship, and then we had the World Tour Series afterwards, I think, or a couple of seasons later. And that at the time set a record on, I think, ACC outside of any official SRO sponsored event, where it did have the highest prize pool of any event at the time on ACC, which was the best part. I think it was £500 for the winner of the championship. But in conjunction with that, then they started to talk about expanding operations onto iRacing. So, again, speaking to Mark and company, they were really generous. They said, look, we will pay for the content you need to make sure that you can cover the first of our GT3 series. So they bought me the Lamborghini Huracan Evo. And so I've never driven it, funny enough, on the simulator. It's always been there just as the car that got me started in commentating on iRacing. And I had to buy a couple of circuits and the subscription. And they also put me in touch with Jack Oliphant, who many of you may know used to work with Next Gen Racing. He also has done presenting work for the British Automobile Racing Club, or the BARC, and now he has recently secured an absolutely brilliant opportunity to cover the Champions League of Handball, if I remember correctly, because he's very heavily invested in handball, and good luck to him. He's really been chasing it for years, and he's a lovely bloke, Jack. Jack essentially gave me some advice on how to do broadcasting on iRacing, so how to use broadcast overlays, SDK, iRacing live timing, etc. And after that, I went into the iRacing sphere, and then things just catapulted once again. So after doing that. I got contacted by several other sim racing communities, including UK Sim Racing, including Wild Things Racing, including, I believe at the time, what was the Rapid Drivers Club, if I remember correctly, or the RDC. And it just continued to expand. But what has gradually happened over time as well is that in the sim racing space, and this is sort of going from 2021 into 2023, is that I've more and more focused my operations on iRacing, because of the longevity of iRacing versus the waning longevity of Assetto Corsa Competizione, although that is debatable now with what's going on with AC Evo, but that's a story for a different world. But the point being that it's really become a mainstay. So that's been my story in a nutshell and I've probably skipped over a few chapters to be fair, but that's how from 2021 through to 2023, I think I've covered everyone correctly there, and I do apologise to anyone I've missed out. That's how I got into sim racing commentary, essentially. And then there's a whole other story that follows off of the back of that, of how it's got me into real life commentary.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about next gen racing as well. But obviously, you've commentated, like you mentioned, on UKSR and also SRI as well. And I think you've commentated on, is it MPRL as well?
Yep, the middle of the pack racing league, our good old friends in the North American community there, but they have races all around the world. That was because of a couple of their drivers being on the next gen grid and then saying, well, could I provide a broadcast? To which I said to them, well, no, because I work a day job plus do this, and I'm based in the UK. And then sort of, well, if you can do it post round and just do it as a recording, we'd love that as well. And that's where I discovered what I really think now is one of the understated services that I can provide, and I love providing for our clients on other sides of the globe, which is the post-round broadcast as if it were live. But that's when that started, and I must admit, I have a huge soft spot for the NPRL. There's some absolutely incredible people there, Jason Lantry being one of them, who of course raced in the Toyota Gazoo Racing North America Cup E-Series, what was, I won't say in 2024, and he did a brilliant job in that. And also got some other members there who, there's too many to list sadly, so I can't, but yeah, no, we're really sort of group.
Yeah, and then talking about sim racing commentary as well, what would your advice and tips be for anyone that's looking to get involved in that sort of thing? Say like someone that's got maybe it's interested, but maybe I don't know, maybe is hesitant, maybe nervous about making that sort of jump, if you like. What would your advice be to them for a first time commentator on sim racing?
Oh no, so it's a very good question. So what I would say is, as you see me now and as we're talking here, know that 4 years ago, or in fact 5 years ago now, it's crazy how time has flown, I used to be a very socially awkward individual. I used to be a nervous wreck about doing these things, right? But one day in my head, it just clicked to me, if you don't try, you'll never know. And that would be the advice I give to people. It's hard. Nobody wants to try something new through the fear of failure, but if you volunteer to do something, you're not being paid to do it, just volunteer and say, you know, I want to give that a go, and just ask anyone. There will be more than enough people out there who'll go, you know what, why don't you give it a go? It's no shame to people, because at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, you've invested a little bit of time. Nobody spent any money. You might have paid some money for the software and the services to be able to do the commentary, but just give it a shot, because until you give it a go, you'll never know. Plus, also, the other bit of advice is don't be afraid of making mistakes. I've been doing this now for the best part of 5 years, and I can tell you one thing, I still make tons of mistakes. I get drivers' names wrong, I get pronunciations completely butchered, etc. Roll with it. One phrase I like to use, and I've started using it more and more, is I like to style things out, which is if you make a complete blunder or something, just go with it. And just find a way of somehow weaving it into your commentary. You never know. People will laugh their heads off. Nobody expects perfection. Anybody who does, it's not what should be expected here. A commentator is there to sell a story in their own unique way and talk about what's happening on the screen. And that's the thing. So my advice would be just give it a go. Try not to hesitate about it, because if it goes wrong, the only person you're really putting yourself under pressure is yourself. Nobody is pressuring you to do a good job. If they've paid you thousands of pounds to do it, slightly different matter, but at this point they shouldn't be paying you thousands of pounds, otherwise I'd be a bit skeptical. But no, that would be my advice, is give it a go, have fun with it, and just don't be afraid, roll with it. If you get it wrong, so be it. If you get it right, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that excuse me, it's something I've noticed since I've started doing podcasts again. I remember the very first episode I recorded when I brought the podcast back. This must be going back about I think it must have been like early early January this year, I think. So I kind of sent a message to the another podcaster that I chat to all the time, and basically like we chat all the time. Basically, kind of like I listen to our podcast, and then it's something I've noticed as well with myself that basically the first episode we recorded, and I'm not kidding. I think I think it went on for I think the recording is actually about 2 hours long because I completely forgot that basically it's one of those things when you're just having fun, like you
Yeah.
completely forget how long it's been going for. And then basically we finished recording, and I was like, "How long did that record?" I was expecting it to be like maybe an hour or an hour and a half or something like that. And then she said, "No, that's 2 hours." I'm like, I was like, I was like, "Oh, I was apologising as well." I was like, "I'm so sorry about that." And then I was like, "Oh no!" And then basically the day after, I done the silliest thing. I was kind of like beating myself up about it to the point it was kind of affecting me mentally a little bit. I was like, oh, kind of just not hitting myself, but I was like, oh, why did I do that mistake? And I sent a message apologising. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry that went on longer than expected. And she was like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. But after looking back at it, I just laugh about it now because obviously I hadn't done any podcast for about 3 years, so it was kind of like a kind of just like a bit of rustiness, if you like. So, but still enjoyed it though. Is basically looking back now, I laugh about it. So I do agree with you. If when it comes to commentating, if you make a mistake or butcher someone's name, just kind of don't stress about it. Just roll with it and kind of. I don't know if they own the mistake is the right way
Yeah.
to describe it, but more just laugh about it and move on, because if you, like you say, like I was saying, I if you stress about it or worry about it too much, it kind of just starts messing with your head a little bit, and that's when it starts coming maybe not enjoyable.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you've hit upon a really good point there, which is if you're enjoying it, that's the most important thing. I mean, it's one of the things they say, and I found it, and it's what motivated me to make the jump from doing this as a hobby to giving it a go as full time, is the fact that I'll be completely transparent. I'd worked in IT since turning 21. And I had fun with it at first, but as I've explored this more and more and got into the motorsport space as well, I found that my real love is to work in that sphere. And I am very fortunate, and I'm sure there'll be some listeners here right now thinking, well, he's lucky the fact that he can take the gamble. Yes, I am. I'm in a very fortunate position whereby I have got the savings net behind me to make the leap, take the risk. And if it goes wrong, I've worked it out. I've got a 3 to 5 year window in which I can afford to explore this and then potentially have to go back to working in IT if needed. But I'm having fun with it. And that, I think, is one of the things that naturally shines through to the people when they see I make mistakes, and when sometimes with some organisers. So I'll give you an example. In a very recent broadcast, I was told at the end of the broadcast I needed to essentially promote an upcoming event from the community. I had so much fun covering the racing, I completely forgot I had to do that at the end of the broadcast. And as soon as I had finished it, obviously one of the organisers was watching and listening, and they went, "You completely forgot to promote our upcoming event." And I went, "Oh, yeah, I was having too much of a good time." And they said, "Don't worry about it at all. See, if you can do it on the next broadcast, we really kind of need you to do it. But the fact that you're having so much fun right now, we can look past it. Your enthusiasm is infectious. We don't mind it." So people are willing to forgive, because if you come across as someone who's having a good time and just having an absolute laugh, people won't care. If I was to say your name's Ryan Walker, for example, if I was to suddenly refer to you as Ryan Waker and I kept doing it all the way through the broadcast, if I do it with enough enthusiasm, nobody's going to mind it. You might not even mind it just for that one broadcast. You might message me afterwards going, "Well, actually, Paul, my name is Walker, not Waker." But in the heat of the moment, nobody minds that because everyone's loving it. I mean, how many times did in the Formula One commentary, was it David Coulthard in the end got Daniel Ricciardo's name wrong and kept referring to him as Daniel Ricciardo, or the other way round? And that was never corrected until, I think, 2 or 3 years after the fact. But everyone rolled with it in the end because that's how it was done. That was the enthusiasm.
Yeah, I mean, like you say with my name, I have actually had someone say my second name, say like Waker, and basically they've came to me and apologised, and it's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry we mispronounced your name on the broadcast," and I'm like, "Nah, don't worry about it." It's like basically you're having fun. That's the main thing. It's basically and I said to them at the time as well, it's not like you done it intentionally. It's try I mean, crikey, I mean, look at the real life commentators that have butchered names or made mistakes in the past. I mean, look at Murray Walker, for example. He was famous for making mistakes, but no one said anything because like they could tell he was enthusiastic.
100%.
But as we move on to real life motorsport as commentary as well, I think if correct how I'll take a guess. I think your first opportunity was with was it the commentating at Snetterton or
Yep, you remember well. So my first chance. So there's a great story to this. 2023, and this was through the Next Gen Racing community. So we had been talking. So obviously I've been working with them since 2021. 2022 came around. And it was a really good year. And one day we were sat down, and for a bit of context, a number of the members who work behind the scenes at Next Gen, so the likes of Mark Sykes, Martin Brinkworth, Jamie Dory, Gaz Williams, they all have involvement in real life motorsport. Gaz, I believe, has raced and he has run several track cars. Jamie works very closely in the background with regards to marshalling, and also I think he has been, you've probably seen him if you've seen Mikey Doble's more recent I can't remember the name of the series, but the 6-part series that's been released as an episodic web series about his 2025 campaign. You'll see Jamie Dory there. He works very closely with Mikey. I don't think that's unfair to say. And also on top of that, Martin Brinkworth originally worked as a marshal, but he has moved very rapidly into the world of race stewarding. And I can't remember his exact role, so I won't misquote it here, but he works behind the scenes at race events, and Mark Sykes works as a marshal. But from speaking to all of them, I one day sat down with them, and a wonderful bunch, and we were sort of talking about the future, and they asked me if I ever wanted to get into real-world motorsport, to which I said I would absolutely love the chance to at least do it once. So, speaking to Martin in particular, he knew and still knows a guy named Ian Waterhouse, who many of you may be aware of, one of the owners of Live Sport Now that covers motorsport events, covers other events in regards to netball, handball, etc. So Martin had a friendly relationship with Ian, and one day at a race event in the middle of 2023, and I think it was in the summer, he met up with Ian at a race day, and he said to Ian, look, I've got a guy I know who would love a chance to do some real life motorsport commentary. Is there any way you could potentially give him an opportunity? I'm sure you'll be impressed by him, obviously referring to myself. So Ian said, yep, if you give me his number, I can see what I can do. Anyway, Martin drops me a message to say, look, I've been in touch with Ian, keep your phone peeled because you might be getting a call at some point. And then 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from Ian towards the end of the race season. So we're in, I think it's September, and he goes, and we do some introductions, and it's great to speak to Ian. He gives me a bit of background on himself and Live Sport Now. And what it is at the time, and I think they might still do this every so often, but perhaps less so for motorsport, excuse me, is that they were offering a one camera service. So the idea was it was a really cheap broadcast, but it would be a commentator with a microphone, or a couple of commentators with a portable microphone, and then you would have one guy with a video camera who would be streaming out via a live stream service to multiple platforms around the world, so to YouTube, to Twitch, etc. But it was a really cheap broadcast, and the idea being that at some circuits like Snetterton, you can put a camera on the hill at turn number 4, Agostini, and you can see 90% of the circuit. And with TSL on your phone, which for the uninitiated is Timing Solutions Limited, which is what we use for most domestic events in the United Kingdom to time race events and see who's leading, who's second, etc., you can provide a really cost-effective broadcast. And that's what Live Sport Now were doing for the MG Owners Club, the MGOC, back, I don't know if that's the name of it, back in 2023. They did go through a reorganisation then, but we can put that aside. Anyway, Ian says to me, look, I'd like you to come along, and I'd like you to join me at least for the Saturday and just give it a go. So anyway, at this point, obviously me being giddy 3 years ago, I'm sort of, oh my God, I got my first chance at doing real life commentary. And so what did I end up doing? I ended up spending what was a couple of sleepless nights doing all my research and all the MGs that were potentially racing. So they had all different classes from MGBs through to, I say modern day, the most modern as we think of MGs before those electric machines have arrived. What would have been the MGZs, I want to say, from the early noughties through to 2006. All those different cars there were racing. And I did my research because it was a season finale, who the championship leaders were and what to expect. And I turned up on the day, met Ian in person, and had an absolutely brilliant laugh. And we also had there, I think it was Charles Boniface, who was also doing commentary work. A very good driver, by the way, if you're ever looking for the tuition with regards to racecraft in real world as well, a real life racing driver. And Ian essentially said, "Follow me." And so on the Saturday morning, they're doing qualifying and they're only recording interviews of the drivers after the qualifying session, the top three essentially. So Ian says, just watch what I do because I'll be giving you the microphone shortly. And I'm sort of, hold up a second, I haven't even spent 5 minutes yet. So he goes over to the first race group and does some interviews of the drivers as they come into the pits after qualifying and says, how did it go, etc., etc. And then after that, a second qualifying session starts and Ian goes, right, here's a microphone. They're going to be coming in about 7 minutes' time. I want you to interview the top three drivers. Just do whatever you think's right. And I'm sort of, hold up a second, really? And anyway, I started interviewing the drivers. I had to get tapped on the shoulder a couple of times because the way I was positioned myself, as you normally see when they do interviews with drivers in their cars, and the cameraman has to try and get an angle where you can see the driver in the car and also perhaps a little bit of the interview or the presenter. Well, I was blocking the driver. But again, you learn something and they gave me some feedback afterwards. But after that, going up to lunchtime, they were very impressed with the way I'd done some of the interviews, and we handed it over to Charles as well. We took it in turns, and then we had some races in the afternoon. And I did a couple of those alongside Charles and Ian. We sort of went through a freeway. We always had two people doing the commentary. Keep in mind that this is in late September, and we're stood right at the top of Agostini Corner. And I'm just there in a t-shirt, by the way, thinking, oh, it's going to be brilliant sunshine and 14 degrees centigrade because I don't enjoy hot conditions very much, let's say that, but I'm freezing because of the wind chill factor, given it's an old airfield. And anyway, as I'm shivering to death up there on that hill, I'm doing commentary with these two gentlemen, and I'm absolutely loving it to bits. I couldn't care about the cold, to be honest. And come the end of the day, Ian says to me, yeah, that was really good. Do you want to come back tomorrow and do it again? I'm sort of, hell yeah, I want to do it again, Ian. And so I spent the whole Sunday with them as well, doing interviews with drivers, also commentating on the racing. And afterwards, Ian was very impressed. So he said to me, we'll definitely be in touch next year about potentially trying to get you involved more and more. And it snowballed after that to an extent. So that was 2023. I just had the one event. I mean, I tell you right now, just doing that felt as though it was all complete, as though go through all the sim racing commentary of 2021 to 2023 and then ending 2023 on that. I thought to myself, right, if I die tomorrow, that's it. I don't care. I'm done. I've ticked all my boxes. Send me a heaven right now. Go send me to see my father up there and I'll leave my mum behind. Although I love my mum to bits as well. But that's how I felt. And then in 2024, through working with Ian, and he got me in touch with also a production company called 24/7 TV, wonderful people there as well. I got a couple more opportunities, so I won't go into all the ins and outs of how it all works now because we could be here for some time. But long story short, I had a couple of opportunities to help provide commentary for some events being hosted by the British Automobile Racing Club, or BARC, including perhaps one of the big highlights of 2024, if my memory serves me correctly, was working alongside Pointy the plumber, or Pointy Robert Clark, I think is also how he goes around on social media, but essentially the lead commentator and presenter for the British Truck Racing Championship. And I was at Donington Park helping cover trucks, as I've been told to emphasise them, because they kept referring to them as cars on the broadcast, which led to some hilarious hijinks between myself and Pointy, whereby essentially he actually took a notepad and put it up to a TV camera and said, look guys, I'm teaching him how to spell trucks, not cars. And we had absolute hysterics in the commentary booth. And yeah, I got to do that. Plus also at Mallory Park, I was both presenter and commentator for a whole weekend for the classic, oh goodness me, the CMMCS. I can't remember what it stands for. I want to say the Classic and Modern Motorsport Club Southern. There we go. Comes back to my brain immediately. But I spent the whole weekend there with a roving cameraman plus two fixed cameras and a broadcast director in my ears, presenting in two drivers and covering all 20 races, including what was a last to first challenge that we witnessed from I can't remember the name of the driver now. It's Ollie. I've forgotten his surname for life of me, but that was absolutely infamous, although my voice completely broke at the end of that one. And that was 2024. And then last year was even bigger in the fact that I had more opportunities to cover events up and down the country, including the Brit Car Endurance Championship, or BEC, after its reorganisation, and also covering working alongside for a couple of rounds of the TCR UK Championship, covering for Paul O'Neill and working alongside Andy McEwen, and also getting to cover things such as the Miltech Civic Cup and also the Junior Saloon Car Championship. I mean, Yeah, it was an absolute blast, and it all ended at Brands Hatch last year with me presenting the Into the Night finale for the Brit Car Endurance Championship, the revival of that race after a couple of years. So that's been the motorsport journey, and well, I can tell you there's even more to come this year, because one of the things I haven't talked about as well is circuit commentary. That started as of last year, although I'll take a pause there because otherwise I think I'll be waxing lyrical and I'll lose my voice.
Yeah, I mean, from what it sounds like, you're starting to build up a bit of a excuse me, you're starting to build up a bit of a resume or CV, if you like. Uh, do you find that the more you commentate, like the more series you commentate on, do you actually find that you're always learning every time, like basically learning new stuff about how to do things and basically areas that you can improve on?
Oh, 100%. I think so. I think one of the things that I've definitely learned from the more series. So in sim racing, I'll be completely transparent. Back when it was really a hobby where I was only covering one or two series, I didn't need to produce that many notes for myself because when I'm only covering 1 to 2 or 3 series a week, I mean, not everyone has the same level of memory. I'm sure some people will be able to remember much better than me. Others will have more forgetful memories. But I used to only need a couple of notes to really get me going anywhere. But as I found I'm covering more and more series and there's greater variety and there's more names coming up, or it's the same names but in different series, I've needed to take more notes, but then I've gradually discovered as I've gone into real life commentary that having too many notes can be just as dangerous to your ability as having too few notes. So I've had to gradually find this middle ground of how many notes I take with me, and actually what you need to know versus what you ideally should know, but nobody's going to notice if you don't know it, the nice to have information. And then there's the completely unnecessary information as well. And that's one of the sort of balance and acts that I've gradually had to learn, is just how much information is needed versus how much is not needed. And also one of the other things I've learned over time, and this is what I've learned from working with other commentators and presenters, is sometimes actually don't be afraid not to talk about the racing for a bit. Make sure you know a bit about the individual drivers and the teams that make up the grid, because they've all got their own unique stories, including, for example, how, if I remember last year, in the Mini Challenge Club Sports Series, one team had essentially their car at Silverstone when they were there supporting the TCR UK meet. They had come all the way from Wales, if I remember correctly. They had got to Silverstone on the Friday to discover that the entire radiator system of their Mini had broken, and the only spare parts they had were all the way back in the factory, back in Wales. And well, for the uninitiated, going from what I think was Cardiff to Silverstone was not a short trip. It was the best part of at least 4 miles one way, so making it 8 miles each way. Essentially, they had to send 2 members of the team to go grab that radiator overnight to get back to the circuit at 3 in the morning to then replace the radiator to get the car out there for qualifying at 9 o'clock in the morning, to which they then discovered that actually it wasn't the radiator that had broken, it was something else entirely they didn't have the spares for, so they had to miss qualifying and they missed all the racing that weekend. But because I knew that, because I'd actually sat down and spoken to them in the build-up and saw how tired they all were, and the fact they were, I think, 6 cups of coffee into the day at 7 in the morning, essentially, when people were asking on the broadcast in the YouTube chat, why is car number 23 not here, for example, I could say this had happened. I could talk about that story when we had a safety car out on the circuit. So there was no racing, but I could spend literally 5 minutes just telling that story. And those are the things I've realized. And that's translated back into the sim racing stuff, where I've actually really tried to make a point of, I love people. I really do. I love the stories of everybody involved. I get to try and know a bit about each of the sim racers because I can always talk about them in the quiet periods like I would in real life in the quiet periods now. So that's one of the things I've learned there, and perhaps the biggest thing I've learned. Also, another thing, because I'm sure somebody's going to probably say this in response to this episode, you could do with also slowing down the rate at which you speak, Paul. Yeah, I'm still working on that. And that's not just for my commentary. That's also because I have been told by some social media people when they're trying to clip up what I commentate on for Bark, they have said, the problem is we love your enthusiasm. Your energy is absolutely brilliant. We just can't find a pause to be able to actually clip what you're saying up. And I'm sort of, yeah, I do make things a bit difficult for you, don't I? And they're sort of, yeah, if you could just take a breath every so often, I think we'd appreciate that a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed that with not commentating, but doing podcasts, that I've had some people say, like, yeah, maybe just take a break for 2 or 3 seconds, take a drink of water, or just take a breath, and just kind of just relax and slow down. And yeah, it's definitely something that I take on board all the time, because I find if I speak too much, yeah, there's been points that I'm maybe just about out of breath, or just kind of like just need to like stop, just need to stop and catch my breath because yeah, is what I mean. I enjoy doing it, but I do notice myself that I'm maybe when I'm having fun, I'm maybe speaking too quickly or not stopping enough, or stopping for 2 or 3 seconds just to kind of just catch my breath. But it's something that I'm definitely working on. And also as well, again, it's kind of going back to or sort of similar a question I asked about sim racing commentating and how to get involved. Or actually, it's a different one I wanted to ask. Actually, do you find with real life commentating, can you what the stuff that you find from real life commentating, can you transfer that back to whenever you're commentating in iRacing? And do you find that helps, or is it completely? I don't know. Is it basically completely like basically different how how you commentate?
It's so I think they are transferable. So I think the biggest thing and it's understandable, it's why I think a lot of people who've really grown up watching motorsport and to them sim racing is brand new, I think trying to feel that sim racing is real or a simulation of reality isn't easy for a lot of people. Whereas if you've grown up playing a lot of racing games, for example, on console, so PlayStation 1 era, or even if you're younger than myself, alternatively only got into gaming later, etc., or older, you can relate more to it. So one of the things that I've found has become quite valuable is the more realistic I try to treat the commentary of sim racing, like I would in real life. So when a car crashes in the simulator, yes, we could just laugh about it because, oh, look, there's a virtual bumper flying through the air. But if you actually really big it up and make it out like it is a real crash, because at the end of the day, whilst the forces may not be real for the driver, what happens in terms of the permutations they're racing is definitely real. It really helps sell the idea of sim racing is as serious as real life racing. That's the number one thing that I've definitely learned from real life commentary. And the second thing to go off that as well is there's the things you say and there's the things you don't say in the commentary booth. So one thing I've definitely discovered is that whenever a contentious incident happens, you can give an opinion on it, but I've always found not to lean too much in terms of opinion. I might say, well, by the looks of things based on that camera angle, it's driver A's fault when he's made contact with driver B, but I will never say definitively, I think that is driver A's fault. I always try and caveat it with, we only get one camera angle in the commentary booth, ladies and gentlemen. The stewards will have plenty more if it gets reported, because at the same time, what you come to realize is a lot of family and friends will be watching that real life racing as they would be watching it in the simulator potentially, because at the end of the day, hey mum, look, I'm on virtual TV doing racing. But people get emotionally invested. They really do in these things. And that's the thing that you've probably heard of saying, why do you run on a treadmill to train for a marathon? Because it's 60 to 70% of the marathon. It's the distance. It's just not the weather conditions. Or alternatively, it's not the actual running on the tarmac or the concrete. It's running on a treadmill. It's the same with the simulator. It is 60 to 70% of the equivalent of you doing the 1 hour race. The thing you're not experiencing is A, the amount of money that you have to spend on getting the car to the grid, but also B, the G-forces. Otherwise, it is very similar. You emotionally invest in it. Your spectators and your fans get emotionally invested. And so I try to pay it back by taking what I do in real life and realizing, right, there's the things you say and you don't say, and you always make sure to treat everybody on the simulator as if it with the ultimate respect. Because at the end of the day, you never know how much this means to a person. They may have spent all their life savings that year to be able to buy the rig to go racing, and they might have invested just as many hours as somebody else has invested on the real life circuit to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I learned when I was doing sim racing commentating on iRacing ages ago. That when there's an accident and it's maybe it's or an incident that with someone you've kind of got to you get that temptation to give your honest view or opinion if you like, but you've kind of got to, or I found that you've got to kind of refrain yourself if you like. Basically, you've got to. Obviously, you can give like basically your view on basically like say for example, or such and such went for a gap when it was closing and it was never on sort of thing. So I don't know if you agree with that you can give those sort of views, but you don't want to go like over the top if you like.
100%. I think you've hit it now on the head there. So one of the things that I got told from very early basis in TV commentary is say what you see. And that's spot on. When you say that you think a driver has gone for a gap that was always closing, you have said what you've seen. If you then say, well, that was never going to happen in a million years, he intentionally dove up the inside when it wasn't going to work, you're not saying what you've seen. You are instead putting opinion above what you've seen. And I think that's the difference. And particularly, I mean, again, it's a completely separate topic. I don't want to go down into it because I think we could be here for years. But obviously, with the rise of social media and with the rise of the fan grouping, let's say, Formula One is a great example of this when big contentious incidents happen, not just Hamilton, Verstappen, but you can have a whole host of drivers. You can get a toxicity that spans out of that where immediately people go, well, the commentator's completely biased against this driver because he says he only wrecks people. And it's, whoa, 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 I never said that. But you've always got to keep in mind that if you say things and they get taken out of context, what is the net effect to you? What's the net effect to the broadcast? And what's the net effect to the actual people on the grid?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it's something I've learned as well, but basically since I started getting back into podcasts as well, read it. I tend not to read social media now just because like you say, you'll get nasty comments or people saying like, oh, such and such sounds like you know, without swearing. Basically, they'll try and be brutal or say bit brutal, nasty, or whatever you like to say, and kind of because I mean, I don't let that stuff get to me now. But obviously, someone else it might be a bit more. I don't know if vulnerable is the right word. They might take it to heart if you like, and it might kind of like affect them mentally or mess with them, and they'll start kind of like questioning themselves, like, oh, am I good enough, or why am I doing this? Should I give it up? And yeah, so it's one of those things that it's something I don't like about social media, that people just find it too easy to be vulgar and nasty, and it's something if I had my way, I would maybe get rid of not get rid of social media, but basically kind of hard to explain. Have like some steps in place that basically, if you want to post the like feedback or whatever, you've got to approve like comments and that sort of thing before you can post it. So basically, you can read it, but you can read it and decide if they're allowed to post that instead of basically them posting it straight away, and then basically nothing gets done about it.
Yeah, no, it's I definitely agree with you. And whilst I think there's so many different ways you could potentially try to fix social media, I think the one thing, and this was something I always got told by my parents when I was growing up, because of growing up in the era where MSN and AOL Messenger were really the big things, and then subsequently, of course, we had the big deluge in at least the United Kingdom, but I presume around the world, with regards to the expansion of social media. I got told, remember, whatever you post on the internet, you've got to be ready to back it up. It is there permanently. And with that in mind, it's why I do my utmost never to post something that can be misconstrued. I mean, anything can be misconstrued, don't get me wrong. Anyone can make up a narrative, but I always try to keep things as neutral or as positive as possible, just because at the end of the day, I sort of think to myself, yep, 3 years from now, somebody could pull that message out of nowhere and just simply go, you know what, actually, I'm now going to construe this into something it's clearly not. And it's helped me out massively on social media because it's enabled me to sort of go and understand what is appropriate feedback versus what is just it's throwaway criticism and those messages as you mentioned only moments ago. And it's actually stilled me up quite nicely. So now I know I always read every comment I get on a broadcast and every part of the chat in a broadcast that I'm presented or commentating on, because at the end of the day, when I read those, it's the ones where it's actual critical and suggestive feedback, or constructive, that's the word I'm looking for, is really helpful. Anything that's destructive, I just automatically filter it to, you know what, well, get rid of that, because at the end of that, if they can't suggest something better, then, well, I'll read it in case there is something glaringly obvious and nobody knows how to give the most constructive feedback at all. But yeah, there's a balance, and I don't want it to ever let it get to me. It sometimes does. We all do. We all get mentally vulnerable sometimes. But I've gradually got there to still myself a lot better now.
Yeah, absolutely. And excuse me, as we move on and just about wrap up as well, is there anyone that you want to give a shout out or a thank you to, Paul, for getting you in the position that you are, not just on iRacing commentary, but to get you to the point of where you are in real life motorsport commentary?
So, I mean, I mentioned a few, but I'll I'll definitely mention them again. And if I do forget anybody here and they're listening to this, I do apologize. It's not intentional. I've forgotten you. There's just so many names over time. So, firstly, Next Gen Racing. First and foremost, the fact if it were not for them discovering me, I would not have been able to go along the journey. So, big thank you to Mark, also to Martin, to Jamie, Gaz, also to Kevin back when he was an admin member of the team. And I still keep in touch with Kevin even to this day. And also, I think that's everyone in the Next Gen space. Also, a huge thank you to both Ian Waterhouse from Live Sport Now, who I'm regularly in contact with. Lovely gentleman, to be fair. Great football commentator, just as much as he's a brilliant motorsport commentator and presenter. And also Jack Oliphant, who works alongside him, and I've had the pleasure of working alongside. They've really helped me catapult myself into the real world space. Also, one person I didn't mention and sort of future plans. In 2025, funny enough, on my birthday, which I won't say the exact date, but towards the end of January last year, I had a phone call from another sim racing commentary star. Some of you may be aware of him, Craig Cook from CC Sim Racing. Does a lot of brilliant work, to be fair, on Gran Turismo Sport and now 7, whereby he essentially contacted me to say, would you be interested, Paul, in circuit commentary for motorbikes? Completely out the blue on my birthday, and I go, Craig, are you giving me the ultimate birthday present or something? And he didn't know it was my birthday, to be fair. And long story short, what it was, so their previous league commentator for the North Gloucestershire Road Racing Club, or the NGRRC, one of the biggest motorcycle racing communities in the United Kingdom, Martin Bennett, he was planning to retire at the end of last year, and he has subsequently retired. And he's had an incredibly decorated history of motorsport commentary. I definitely recommend, if anyone's curious, do check out Martin Bennett. He's done so much great work, and he's given me some great advice as well. But essentially, Craig was the number 2 commentator alongside Martin. But with Martin's retirement, the plan was, and has now been confirmed, that Craig is now becoming the new Martin. He's becoming the lead commentator. And then they needed someone to be the number 2. And so Craig was asked, would you recommend anyone? And Craig and I have talked in the past. We've not worked together, funny enough, but we have talked. And Craig essentially suggested me. He got in touch with me. And in the whole of last year, where I could, I was actually following the North Gloucestershire Road Racing Club around the United Kingdom for their race meets. I had to miss a couple of them due to clashes. But they actually let me have a go of doing some commentary over a few races where I was allowed to, plus also doing interviews down in the pit lane with the riders and getting to know a whole host of riders there, including some very highly decorated individuals. And well, as a result, what it means now is going into this year, Craig has now become the new Martin, and I have become the new Craig. So Craig and I, 2 sim racing commentators, have now made it into real life circuit commentary for the whole of 2026 for the North Gloucestershire Road Racing Club, or the NGRRC. And I'm really excited for that, because they've got the test day at Castle Combe at the start of next month in March, and then they've got the first race meet at Brands Hatch at the end of March 2026. And a huge thank you to Craig for giving me the opportunity. A huge thank you to the club themselves for taking me on. I've had some really good feedback from them and the riders, and also a huge thank you to Martin for all the advice he's given me over last year, even though I've only known him for a brief period of time, and I hope I do get to know him for longer as the year goes on. So definitely a big thank you to them. I'd also like to give a big thank you to some of the American communities I've worked with, and who have helped me realise that providing post-round broadcasts can be just as good as doing live broadcasts in the sim racing space. So the Middle of the Pack Racing League, particularly to Jason, to Jermaine, and also to Lee there. And also want to say a big thank you to Alpha Touring Challenge, the American equivalent of the Next Gen Racing Touring Car Championship, albeit in the US. A huge thank you to Logan McKinsey in particular there, who has been an absolute star, and has helped me open up sometimes and realise that sometimes, you know what, it's sometimes about the beating heart of the community that you've really, if you get to know the beating heart of the community, it doesn't matter how bad a broadcast ends up being, everyone has a good laugh, because there's been some funny broadcasts in the past, but it's always worked out. I think that's everybody as far as I'm aware. Oh, how can I forget UK Sim Racing, now part of Sim Racing International? A huge thank you to James Bostock at Sim Racing International for bringing him on board there. It's been a while, but we got that to happen last year. And also, I need to give a little shout out to Conspit, the Chinese sim racing hardware provider, because of the fact that I decided one day for a laugh just to start doing a strength of field broadcast for the iRacing Official GTE series, and that's why I've got the pen here, because I've got a notes list that I'm making sure, because I've got all thank yous on here. And yeah, they decided one day to essentially get behind the broadcast, which was really great. Then they've transitioned over to sponsoring the Porsche Cup on iRacing, and I've been working with them. So to Bruno and Albert in particular there, they've been absolutely great. So I think that's everyone. And I mean, I could also say my friends, a big thank you to my good friend Jack, who supported me every step of the way, plus also a huge thank you to my good Danish friend Lasse, who definitely has been there really behind me, really pushing me on, and has also helped me with plenty of Danish names in the Danish F4 Championship, which iRacing are presenting their channels on a fortnightly basis this year, and I'm on the commentary team for. So, sorry, that was a bit over the top there, the number of thank yous, but there's just so many people along the way, and to yourself, of course, Ryan, for, well, not just bringing me on the podcast today, but also being a friend and also someone who I've worked with to a degree in the past and had the pleasure of watching a race and also watching plenty of broadcasts we've been in the commentary booth, because I really feel as though I could be here forever saying thank you to people, and I wish I could, and I can't remember everybody, but I'm very grateful to be in a position where I can do this, and I hope that I can pay it back in kind and pay it forward, that next year, this time next year, I'm still doing this as my job, not as a hobby again, and that this continues and continues to expand. If not, it's been one heck of a ride. I'm going to make the most of it whilst it lasts, and I owe it to you all, and hopefully I can do you all proud now.
And yeah, first off, thank you for joining the show, by the way, Paul. You've been an absolute superstar as always, not just in the call on the broadcast, like you say, on iRacing, like you mentioned, but just I love your work, and I look forward to watching more of the same as the year goes on. And obviously the GT series on the SRI, obviously, like you mentioned, iRacing that, and you call the races yourself as well. So always enjoy watching them back. And yeah, I look forward to watching how you get on this year, especially when it comes to real life motorsport commentary. And yeah, looking forward to see what opportunities come your way.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. It's been an absolute pleasure. And, well, thank you to everyone who's been listening to this podcast, because it's been an absolute blast.
Absolutely. And yeah, if anyone wants to keep up to date with the podcast or wants to follow it, you can follow it on Spotify by searching for the Satellite Racing Podcast, or you can follow the podcast page on Instagram by following at Sat Racing Cast. And also, you can find us on, I can't remember what else, I was trying to think what else you can find us on, what's as bad of me. So, actually, you can find us on YouTube. That what's the YouTube channel that I just started as well, which is pretty much where all the video podcasts get uploaded to. So, yeah, look for the Satellite Racing Podcast on YouTube and to find that. But, yeah, again, Paul, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and yeah, thanks to anyone that watches this podcast or listens to it on Spotify, and we will see you around.